One of the most powerful leaders in the world, Vladimir Putin, began his political career almost as an unknown. Before becoming president of Russia, he served as prime minister and was a former head of the Russian intelligence agency, the KGB. Many believed his time in power would be brief. Yet 25 years later, Putin remains firmly in command of Russia and is widely regarded as a kind of 21st-century Czar, leaving deep marks on the country in political, economic, social, and geopolitical terms. In this video, we will examine 4 key areas that illustrate how Russia has changed under Putin's leadership, starting with how he came to power, moving through economic transformations, expanding external influence, and increasing authoritarianism, culminating with an analysis of how Putin himself assesses his 25 years in office, as reported to the BBC. Putin's path to power began in 1999, a critical period shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the transition from a communist system to a capitalist model. At that time, Boris Yeltsin led a government marked by instability, controversial privatizations of state-owned enterprises, and frequent tensions with the legislative branch. While Russians experienced unprecedented democratic advances, they also faced severe economic decline, a drastic drop in purchasing power, and social insecurity. On December 31st, 1999, Yeltsin announced his resignation in a New Year's Eve message that would become historic, transferring power to Vladimir Putin, who had only been prime minister for 4 months. Putin had gained public trust and popularity after commanding a successful, albeit violent, military intervention in the separatist province of Chechnya, projecting an image of strong and decisive leadership to the Russian people. The first months of Putin's presidency were particularly significant. 3 months after assuming the role of acting president, he won the election by popular vote, initiating a trajectory that would see him accumulate 5 consecutive terms, including controversial constitutional changes that allowed him to extend his tenure. The 2024 election, in which Putin secured 87% of the vote, faced accusations of fraud from the opposition and part of the international community. With this, Putin became Russia's longest-serving leader since Joseph Stalin, who ruled the Soviet Union for 26 years until his death in 1953. A key factor in Putin's early popularity was economic recovery. The oil and gas sector flourished, making Russia a major fuel exporter and a cornerstone of the national economy. Despite disruptions in the European market due to the war in Ukraine and Western sanctions, Russia maintained exports to countries such as China and India, and even partially resumed sales to Europe. The conflict and sanctions forced the country to redirect a significant portion of its production toward the military and arms industry. Although the sustainability of this model over the long term remains uncertain, it has so far kept the Russian economy functioning, also aided by the influx of Chinese products. Geopolitically, Russia's closer ties with China represent only one of Putin's strategic moves. During his first decade in power, he maintained cordial diplomatic and commercial relations with the West, but military offensives in Ukraine have drastically changed that scenario. Today, relations with Europe remain tense, while ties with the United States have experienced fluctuations. Special attention must be paid to the relationship with the Trump administration, which increasingly showed rapprochement toward Putin, highlighting Moscow's strategy to consolidate influence across different global regions. Moreover, Russia has expanded its role in Africa. It is now the second largest arms exporter to sub-Saharan Africa, second only to China. Russia is also present on the continent through the feared Wagner Group, rebranded as the Africa Corps after the death of its leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. This private military group offers security services to unstable governments in countries such as Niger, Libya, Mali, and Sudan, and participates in the exploration of oil and mineral resources. Analysts view Wagner as a strategic instrument of Russian foreign policy, allowing Moscow to extend its influence without engaging directly in formal military conflicts. Domestically, Russia has undergone notable transformations under Putin, primarily through increasing authoritarianism. According to the United Nations, at least 1,300 individuals have been imprisoned for political reasons, mainly for criticizing the invasion of Ukraine. An independent media faces persecution and censorship. Although the Kremlin denies an increase in authoritarian measures, reports from the BBC and other correspondents indicate that daily life in Russia reflects a growing state control over society with restrictions on freedom of expression and political participation. The war in Ukraine has also profoundly impacted Russian citizens. BBC investigations have identified over 95,000 Russian soldiers killed in combat, and thousands of young people have left the country to avoid military conscription. Russia is also confronting a demographic crisis, with UN projections suggesting that by the end of this century, the country could have 20 million fewer inhabitants than it currently does. A situation with serious implications for the labor market, social security, and economic stability. Politically, the combination of authoritarian measures, media control, centralization of power, and repression of opposition has transformed the domestic landscape, consolidating Putin's authority like no other leader in recent Russian history. This centralization allows him to implement strategic policies effectively, but it also draws international criticism for eroding democratic institutions and civil rights. Economically, despite the challenges posed by sanctions, Russia has maintained key sectors, especially through energy exports and partnerships with strategic allies like China and India. This international interdependence has enabled the country to withstand external pressures, securing revenue essential to fund the military and support geopolitical expansion. The defense industry has become a core component of the economy, providing employment, fostering technological development, and sustaining Russia's presence in international conflicts and mercenary operations. Putin's own assessment of his 25 years in power, as shared in his BBC interview, shows a leader aware of his trajectory and the impact of his policies. He emphasized achievements in economic development, state consolidation, projection of power abroad, and defense of national interests. While acknowledging challenges and international criticism, Putin maintains a narrative of success, highlighting resilience in the face of adversity and his ability to adapt to internal and external crises. On the international stage, Russia under Putin has significantly expanded its influence across multiple continents. Beyond Africa, Russia has strengthened its presence in Asia and the Middle East, building strategic alliances and enhancing its negotiating power in global forums. This multipolar approach directly challenges Western-dominated power structures, altering the global geopolitical balance and positioning Moscow as a central actor in crises and international negotiations. In summary, Putin's 25 years in power reflect a profound transformation of Russia in multiple dimensions. Economically, he consolidated key sectors and sought autonomy from external pressures. Politically, he centralized power and reinforced authoritarian control. Socially, the country faces demographic challenges and the consequences of conflicts. Internationally, Russia expanded influence, forged strategic partnerships, and strengthened military and economic presence in key regions. This combination of policies and strategies uniquely positions Russia in the global arena, reflecting Putin's vision of leadership, power, and strategic survival in a multipolar, competitive world. Finally, public perception of these changes in Russia is complex. BBC reports indicate a diverse landscape of opinion, ranging from support for the government to silent criticism, often suppressed by state apparatuses. Wars, sanctions, and internal crises shape citizens' sense of security, national identity, and expectations for the future, with Putin's leadership remaining a central factor in the country's trajectory. This concludes our analysis of Vladimir Putin's 25 years in power, highlighting the key developments that have transformed Russia into a country with centralized authority, assertive international presence, and adaptive economic policies, despite significant internal and external challenges. For those interested in a deeper understanding, the BBC offers a full playlist of videos on Russia, geopolitics, and international relations to provide further context and insight into Putin's role in the 21st century.